Sobrang di ko pa mapaniwala. Maraming salamat sa suporta. At sana patuloy yung suporta.
She didn't just pause a tennis match. She paused the world. What unfolded on a sun-scorched court in Doha wasn't a highlight reel forehand or a championship-winning ace. It was something far rarer. Something that cracked through the noise of rankings, rivalries, and ruthless competition. It was a hug. A raw, unfiltered, utterly human embrace that turned the Qatar Open into the epicenter of a global emotional earthquake. And at the heart of it stood the pride of the Philippines, the fearless 20-year-old warrior, Alexandra Eala. But to understand why this moment has millions in tears, we need to step into that stadium, feel the desert heat pressing down, hear the crack of the ball slicing through the air, and see the one quiet figure who changed everything. Court 3 in Doha shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, flags waving, cameras flashing, expectation hanging thick in the air. The tournament is known for glamour and grit, for elite clashes and early-season statements. Players arrive here chasing points, prestige, and momentum. On this particular day, Alex was locked in battle, eyes sharp, feet dancing across the baseline, her focus razor-thin. Every rally felt like a test of nerve. Every point mattered. Yet in a stadium packed with thousands, one presence stood out. Not loud, not dramatic, but profoundly still. Her name is Elena. 72 years old. A grandmother from rural Victoria, Australia. She wasn't dressed for spectacle. She wasn't there for luxury boxes or social media selfies. She sat in a wheelchair, her body weakened by chronic illness, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the armrests. For Elena, this was not entertainment. This was pilgrimage. 4 years, through hospital visits and quiet nights filled with pain, she had found strength in watching one young athlete refuse to surrender on court. To her, Alex wasn't just a rising tennis star. She was proof that resilience could be beautiful. That setbacks didn't have to define the ending. And so Elena made a choice that defies logic but makes perfect sense to the heart. Living on a modest pension already strained by medical bills, she took the most precious item she owned, a necklace given to her decades earlier by her late husband, a keepsake woven with memories of a lifetime, and she sold it. She traded the last physical symbol of her shared past for one chance. One ticket. One afternoon. One opportunity to breathe the same air as the young woman who unknowingly helped her endure the darkest days. The match raged on. Alex fought fiercely, her ground strokes snapping with intensity. The crowd roared at winners and gasped at near misses. But then, in a moment so subtle it almost escaped the cameras, something shifted. Between points, Alex's eyes wandered toward the sidelines. They locked onto Elena. She didn't know her name. She didn't know about the illness, the pension, or the necklace. But sometimes recognition doesn't need biography. Sometimes it's felt. Perhaps she saw the tears glistening in the older woman's eyes. Perhaps she noticed the way Elena leaned forward, as if willing her body to overcome its own limits just to be closer to the action. Whatever it was, something passed between them, silent, electric, undeniable. And then, the unthinkable happened. Instead of resetting for the next point, Alex placed her hand over her heart. The gesture was slow, deliberate, deeply sincere. The murmurs in the stadium grew. Confusion flickered across faces. And then she ran. Not toward her chair. Not toward her coach. She ran toward Elena. Security stiffened. The chair umpire leaned forward. The crowd held its collective breath. Across the hard court, past the lines that define professional boundaries, Alex sprinted to the edge of the stands. She reached the wheelchair. And without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around Elena in a fierce, protective embrace. It wasn't staged. It wasn't polished. It was tight, emotional, real. The stadium fell into a silence so complete it felt sacred. Thousands of spectators froze, witnessing something far bigger than sport. Cameras zoomed in, but they couldn't capture what truly mattered, the energy of that hug. Elena clung to her, overwhelmed, tears flowing freely. And then Alex leaned in and whispered 3 words that would echo far beyond Doha. "Thank you for coming." Just that. No grand speech. No theatrics. Gratitude. Pure and simple. The silence shattered into a thunderous standing ovation. Applause crashed like a wave. Strangers wiped their eyes. People who had arrived expecting a routine tournament match found themselves part of something unforgettable. In that instant, rankings vanished. The scoreboard became irrelevant. What mattered was connection. What mattered was the reminder that even at the highest levels of competition, empathy still has a place. Yet here's what makes this even more powerful. This moment didn't happen after a triumphant victory. It didn't come during a trophy ceremony. It unfolded in the shadow of disappointment. Because Alex had just suffered a tough loss, an early exit that stung deeply. Critics were already circling. Questions about consistency and pressure filled timelines. Many athletes in that emotional state retreat inward, headphones on, eyes down, walls up. Alex did the opposite. She chose to step outward. She chose compassion over self-pity. That decision reveals more about her character than any statistic ever could. At just 20 years old, carrying the hopes of millions of Filipinos who wake at impossible hours to watch her compete, she demonstrated a maturity that can't be coached. She understood that greatness isn't only measured by trophies. Sometimes it's measured by who you notice when you're hurting. The hug in Doha was not just a viral clip. It was a declaration. A statement that sport, at its core, is about shared humanity. And as that video spread from Manila to Melbourne, from London to Los Angeles, one truth became impossible to ignore. We had just witnessed a moment that transcended tennis. But this story doesn't end in Qatar. In fact, what happened next in Dubai would transform this emotional chapter into something even more extraordinary. And if you thought the hug was powerful, wait until you see what came after. If Doha was the emotional explosion, Dubai became the reckoning. Just days after that unforgettable embrace at the Qatar Open, after the early round defeat that sent critics typing furiously and analysts dissecting every missed opportunity, Alexandra Eala boarded a flight to the United Arab Emirates carrying far more than a tennis bag. She carried the image of a grandmother in a wheelchair. She carried the echo of a stadium standing in tears. She carried 3 simple words that had somehow become heavier than any ranking points. Thank you for coming. Professional tennis is merciless. There is no time to sit with heartbreak. No room to dwell. One loss blends into the next tournament draw. And waiting in Dubai was not a gentle reset. It was the roaring stage of the Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships, a WTA 1000 battlefield where only the sharpest survive. The skyline glittered. The lights burned bright against the desert night. The world's best were assembled. And Alex arrived with questions swirling around her like sand in a storm. Was Doha a setback? Was the pressure tightening? Could she convert promise into dominance? Those whispers grow loud in elite sport. They creep into locker rooms. They follow players onto practice courts. But something about Alex felt different. Those who watched her warm-up sessions noticed a calm intensity. Not forced. Not frantic. Focused. As if the noise had receded. As if something had snapped into clarity. When she stepped onto the Dubai court for her opening match, the atmosphere crackled. Opponents at this level don't offer rhythm. They attack it. Early rallies were brutal exchanges, baseline to baseline, each shot probing for weakness. Alex's footwork was crisp. Her backhand down the line cut through the air like a blade. But more than the technical precision, there was emotional presence. No visible frustration after missed points. No head drops. No rushed impatience. Instead, there was composure. Point by point. Breath by breath. It was as if Doha had stripped away something unnecessary. The first set became a statement. When pressure moments arrived, 30 all, deuce, breakpoint down, she leaned in rather than shrinking back. She saved break chances with fearless aggression. She stepped inside the baseline on second serves. The kind of conviction that separates contenders from hopefuls began to surface. And when she closed the set with a ripping forehand winner, the roar felt different from Qatar. This wasn't just support. It was belief solidifying. The second set tested her resilience. Momentum shifted. Her opponent found rhythm. A service break slipped away. In previous months, that kind of swing might have spiraled. But here, Alex reset instantly. Eyes forward. Shoulders squared. There was a subtle gesture between points, hand briefly over heart. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just grounding. And you couldn't help but think of Elena. Somewhere in Australia, watching through a screen, probably gripping the edge of her chair just as tightly as she had in Doha. That knowledge does something powerful. It reframes pressure. Instead of fearing disappointment, you compete to honor connection. Instead of playing not to lose, you play because it matters. And that shift is everything. Alex broke back. Then held. Then broke again. When match point arrived, she didn't rush it. A long rally unfolded, heavy topspin exchanges pushing both players to the corners. Finally, a short ball floated mid-court. She stepped in and drove it cleanly past her opponent. Winner. Game. Set. Match. The fist pump was controlled but fierce. Not relief. Not surprise. Determination. The Dubai crowd sensed it too. Something was building. Interviews afterward hinted at the transformation. She spoke about perspective. About remembering why she loves the sport. About gratitude. She didn't reference the hug directly, but you could hear it in her tone. The narrative began shifting almost instantly. Headlines that had questioned her consistency days earlier now asked if a breakthrough run was unfolding. Social media buzzed with a new phrase, the Elena effect. Was it coincidence? Was it destiny? Or was it simply what happens when an athlete reconnects with her purpose at the exact moment she needs it most? The next round raised the stakes. A higher-ranked opponent. Bigger serves. Faster pace. The kind of match that exposes hesitation. The first set slipped away in a tight tiebreak, echoes of Doha threatening to resurface. For a flicker of a moment, doubt hovered. But champions aren't defined by avoiding adversity. They're defined by their response. Alex returned to the court after the changeover with a different energy. She started attacking second serves relentlessly. She redirected pace with surgical precision. Her court coverage expanded, retrieving balls that seemed untouchable. The crowd volume swelled with every improbable save. And then the momentum flipped entirely. She dominated the second set. In the decider, tension reached a fever pitch. Every game felt monumental. At 4-4, breakpoint against her. Silence in the stadium. She bounced the ball deliberately. Toss. Serve wide. Ace. The eruption was deafening. 2 points later, she held. Then, sensing vulnerability across the net, she struck. A blistering return winner sealed the break. When she served for the match, there was no hesitation. First serve in. Rally exchange. Backhand cross-court. Error forced. Victory secured. And suddenly, what began as redemption was evolving into something bigger, a run. Commentators began whispering about ranking implications. About statements sent to the tour. But the deeper storyline was emotional continuity. The hug in Doha had not been a detour from competition. It had become fuel. In press conferences, she emphasized staying present. Competing with heart. Appreciating the journey. There was maturity in her answers beyond her years. And the tennis world took notice. Analysts who once focused solely on technical development now spoke about intangible strength. About emotional intelligence under fire. About how rare it is for a 20-year-old to carry national expectations without collapsing under them. With each win in Dubai, the idea solidified. This wasn't random. This was evolution. Somewhere in rural Victoria, Elena watched every point. Interviews later revealed she cried through most of them. Not out of sadness, but pride. The necklace was gone, yes. But in its place existed something no object could equal, a shared moment immortalized. A connection that now traveled across continents with every serve Alex struck. And as the tournament advanced toward its decisive stages, one question hung electric in the air. How far could this go? Was this simply a strong showing? Or was this the week Alexandra Eala announced herself unequivocally to the elite tier of women's tennis? Dubai had become more than a tournament. It had become a proving ground. And the story was far from finished. By the time the Dubai skyline began glowing under championship weekend lights, this was no longer just another tournament storyline. It had become a movement. What started as a heartbreaking first-round exit at the Qatar Open had transformed into a surge of belief at the Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships. And at the center of it all stood Alexandra Eala, no longer fighting questions, but answering them with thunder. The deeper she advanced into the draw, the heavier the spotlight grew. Cameras followed her practice sessions. Commentators dissected her improved court positioning. Analysts replayed slow-motion breakdowns of her serve mechanics, pointing out the extra margin, the smarter placement, the bolder second delivery. But what statistics couldn't measure was the shift in presence. She wasn't playing tight. She wasn't chasing validation. She was competing free. In the quarterfinal, the atmosphere felt like a final. The opponent across the net had pedigree, power, and experience in these exact moments. The rallies were punishing, stretching well beyond 10, 15, sometimes 20 strokes. Every inch of court was contested territory. Alex slid into backhands, redirected pace with startling precision, and absorbed pressure without panic. When she dropped the first set by the narrowest margin, there was no visible frustration. She sat calmly during the changeover, towel draped across her shoulders, eyes steady. You could almost sense the internal dialogue. Stay here, stay now, 1 point at a time. The second set became a masterclass in resilience. She began stepping inside the baseline earlier, taking time away from her opponent. Her forehand found sharper angles. She turned defense into sudden offense with fearless transitions to the net. The crowd felt the momentum swing like a physical force. With each game she claimed, belief expanded. And when she forced a deciding set, the roar that echoed through the stadium carried more than excitement, it carried expectation. The final set unfolded like cinema. Break exchanged for break. Deuce after deuce. At 5-5, the tension was almost unbearable. On a critical rally, pushed wide into the doubles alley, Alex unleashed a running forehand that curled impossibly back inside the line. Gasps erupted. Even her opponent paused in disbelief. 2 points later, she secured the break. Serving for the match, she bounced the ball deliberately, crowd murmuring, hearts racing. First serve in. A short exchange. Then a backhand down the line so clean, so unapologetic, it felt like punctuation. Victory. She didn't collapse to the court. She stood tall, fist clenched, eyes lifted briefly toward the sky before scanning the crowd. Somewhere across continents, Elena was watching. The semi-final raised the stakes again. Fatigue threatened. Muscles tighten late in tournaments. But emotional clarity can override physical strain. Alex competed with a balance of aggression and patience that stunned seasoned observers. She varied spin, mixed height, changed tempo. It wasn't reckless brilliance, it was controlled fire. When the final point of the semi-final ended, confirming her place in the biggest final of her young career, the reaction wasn't just applause, it was awe. Commentators began speaking in definitive tones. This wasn't potential anymore. This was arrival. And then came championship night. Under the blazing lights of Dubai, facing an opponent ranked among the established elite, Alex stepped onto the court carrying the invisible weight of history. For Southeast Asia. For the Philippines. For every young player who dared to dream beyond perceived limits. The first set was razor-thin. Nerves flickered on both sides. Double faults appeared. Breaks were traded. It pushed to a tiebreak. The pressure in those moments can suffocate even veterans. But she played it with fearless conviction, stepping in, attacking returns, trusting her patterns. She edged it. 1 set away. The second set tested everything. Her opponent responded with ferocity, blasting winners and reclaiming momentum. The match leveled. It would come down to one final set. And this is where perspective becomes power. When exhaustion whispers that it's enough. When doubt tries to creep back in. That's when memory steps forward. The hug. The tears. The sacrifice of a necklace sold for a single seat in Doha. This wasn't about fear of losing. It was about honoring connection. At 3-3 in the decider, Alex produced the most electrifying game of her week. 2 return winners, a passing shot threaded through a gap that barely existed, and a break secured with a scream that carried years of ambition. The stadium shook. She consolidated with a fearless hold. At 5-4, serving for the championship, the tension was cinematic. First point lost. Second point won with an ace down the tee. A rally stretched to 20 shots before she forced an error. Championship point. Silence draped over the arena. She exhaled. tossed, served wide. The return floated short. She stepped in and drove a forehand into the open court. Clean, decisive, unreachable. Game, set, championship. The roar that followed felt like release. She dropped to her knees this time, overwhelmed. Not by relief alone, but by recognition of the journey from Doha's heartbreak to Dubai's triumph. From a loss shadowed by doubt to a title illuminated by purpose. During the trophy ceremony, her voice trembled slightly. She thanked her team, her family, her supporters back home. And then she paused. "To everyone who believes," she said softly, "this is for you." Those watching knew it was for Elena too. Back in Victoria, tears streamed freely once more, but this time through joy. The necklace was gone forever. But in its place lived a story that would be told for generations. A reminder that sometimes, when sport feels transactional and ruthless, it can still deliver grace. The broader meaning of this chapter stretches beyond rankings or prize money. It redefines what momentum truly is. It shows that compassion doesn't weaken competitors, it strengthens them. That empathy and excellence can coexist. That a 20-year-old athlete can carry national expectation without losing her humanity. As this season continues, new challenges will arise. Tough draws, injuries, setbacks. That's the nature of professional tennis. But something fundamental has shifted. Alexandra Eala has stepped into a new dimension, not just as a contender, but as a symbol. A symbol that greatness is measured not only in trophies, but in the moments when you choose connection over retreat. The hug in Doha will live forever. The title in Dubai will define a milestone. Together, they form a narrative arc that feels almost mythical. Yet it happened. Real court, real tears, real triumph. And somewhere, in a quiet Australian home, a grandmother watches highlights replayed on loop, knowing she was part of something extraordinary. This is why sport matters. Not just for the spectacle, not just for the rivalry, but for the reminder that even in arenas built for competition, humanity can still steal the show. And as the tennis world looks ahead to what Alexandra Eala does next, one truth feels undeniable: this is only the beginning.